Alan Carter sat in his office aboard the human diplomatic station. The blue glow of his screen lit up his tired face. He had not slept in 30 hours. The message from Earth had arrived yesterday, and since then, he had been reviewing the evidence over and over again. The Shorian Empire had crossed the line. Alan rubbed his eyes and looked out the large window at the stars. For 15 years, he had represented humanity at the Galactic Council. In that time, he had earned respect from even the oldest species. They called him fair, patient, and wise. Now he wondered if that reputation would be enough. Ambassador, the Shorian ships have established orbital control over New Horizon, said Olivia Wright as she entered the office. Her voice was steady, but Alan could see the worry in her eyes. Olivia had been his assistant for 7 years, and in that time, they had faced many challenges together. But nothing like this. How many civilians? Alan asked, his voice quiet. Early reports say 8,000 human colonists and about 3,000 from allied species. The Shorians are allowing emergency ships to leave, but they've closed the spaceports to incoming traffic. Alan nodded and stood up. He walked to the large star map that covered one wall of his office. With a gesture, he zoomed in on the Perseus arm, where 3 systems now glowed red instead of green. The Shorian Empire had taken them all in a coordinated move that had clearly been planned for years. They think we're weak, Alan said. They've been watching us since first contact. They see how much we value peace, how hard we work to solve problems through talking instead of fighting. They think it means we're afraid to fight. Olivia joined him at the map. What will Earth do? Our ships in that region are mostly science vessels and small patrols. The Shorian battle groups outnumber us 5-1. 6-1, actually, Alan corrected. They brought in their 3rd fleet from the Cygnus border last month. We noticed but didn't think much of it at the time. He sighed. That was my mistake. Alan touched the map again, and it showed the positions of all known Shorian military assets. There were hundreds of ships, forming a wall of power that no human fleet could hope to challenge directly. Ambassador, the Council has called an emergency session for tomorrow. The Shorians are claiming they were invited to help maintain order after civil unrest in the colonies. Alan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Civil unrest they created by sending in disguised operatives 3 months ago. We have the proof now, but it came too late. He turned away from the map and walked to his desk. There, he picked up a small wooden carving of Earth that his daughter had made for him before he left on this assignment. He turned it in his hands, feeling the rough texture of the continents. They've miscalculated, he said finally. The Shorians have existed for 10,000 years. In that time, they've dealt with hundreds of species, most of them already stable and peaceful when they reached the stars. Alan set the carving down and looked at Olivia. But humans, we fought our way to peace. We didn't start out kind or wise. We learned to be that way because we saw the alternative up close. Olivia nodded slowly. What are you going to tell the Council tomorrow? Alan's expression became firm, determined. The truth, that the Shorian Empire has broken the peace, and now they're going to learn why that was a mistake. He turned back to the map, studying the red systems. Tell Sam to prepare the diplomatic shuttle and contact Earth. I need to speak with the President before the Council meeting. What are you planning? Olivia asked. Alan looked at her, his eyes reflecting the light of the stars. The Shorians think this is about territory. It's not. It's about precedent. If we let them take these systems without consequences, they'll never stop. So we're going to teach them why humanity survived its own violent history, and why breaking peace with us is something they'll regret for generations to come. Olivia nodded and left to carry out his orders. Alan turned back to the window, watching the distant stars. Tomorrow would change everything. The Shorian Empire had existed for 10,000 years, but they had never faced humans before. They were about to learn what that meant. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with tension. Representatives from 37 spacefaring civilizations sat in rising tiers around the central speaking platform. Many whispered to each other, their voices creating a low hum that echoed through the massive room. Alan Carter walked calmly to the center platform. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps with no decorations except a small pin showing Earth and its moon. Next to him, Olivia carried a data pad with his notes, though he doubted he would need them. What he had to say today was burned into his mind. The council elder, a tall mantarid with shimmering scales, raised her 4 arms for silence. This emergency session will now begin. Ambassador Carter of Earth has requested to address the situation in the Perseus arm. Ambassador, you have the floor. Alan nodded his thanks and touched the controls on the podium. Immediately, the air above him filled with images from the occupied systems. They showed Jorian warships in orbit around peaceful colonies, troops setting up checkpoints in city streets, and frightened civilians being processed through identification stations. 3 days ago, Alan began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. The Jorian Empire violated the non-expansion treaty by sending military forces into 3 neutral systems, New Horizon, Ta Ceti, and Barnard's Star. They claimed they were invited to restore order following civil unrest. He paused and looked directly at Lord Varix, the Jorian ambassador. The tall, gray-skinned alien sat with perfect posture, his 4 eyes blinking slowly in sequence. This was a lie, Alan continued, and I can prove it. With another touch to the controls, the images changed to show Jorian operatives in disguise entering the colonies months earlier. There were records of money transfers, weapon shipments, and detailed plans for creating the appearance of civil unrest. For the past 2 years, the Jorian Empire has been planning this takeover. They deliberately created problems they could solve with military occupation. This evidence has been verified by independent sources and is available to all council members for review. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Several species that had suffered similar Jorian tactics in the past looked particularly disturbed. The Mantarid elder had to raise her arms again for silence. The Jorian Empire has calculated that humanity's limited fleet cannot challenge their technological superiority. Alan continued when the room quieted. They believe we will accept token apologies while they take control of these resource-rich systems. They are wrong. Lord Varix stood then, his voice deep and smooth. The Jorian Empire has existed for 10,000 years. Ambassador Carter. In that time, we have brought order and prosperity to countless worlds. If your evidence is genuine, which I doubt, it merely shows our concern for stability in a troubled region. Alan didn't look away from the Jorian's 4-eyed gaze. Humanity does not seek war, Lord Varix. But neither will we reward conquest disguised as peacekeeping. The Jorian Empire has 20 standard days to withdraw all military presence from the occupied systems and provide full reparations to affected populations. Lord Varix laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet chamber. Or what? Ambassador Carter, your species has barely mastered interstellar travel. You have fewer than 300 warships in total. The Empire deploys more than that in a single fleet. Alan smiled then, but it didn't reach his eyes. Or we will teach the Empire why humanity survived its own violent history. Is that a threat of military action? The Mantarid elder asked, concern evident in her voice. No, Alan replied. It is a promise of consequences. Humanity has learned through bitter experience that peace must be defended, or it becomes meaningless. We prefer diplomacy, trade, and cultural exchange. But make no mistake, we remember how to fight when necessary. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. The Jorian Empire believes they understand humans because they've observed us for 30 years. But they've misinterpreted our restraint as weakness, our patience as fear. 20 days, Lord Varix. After that, the Empire will learn what happens when you break peace with humanity. As Alan stepped down from the platform, the chamber erupted into chaos. Some representatives called for sanctions against the Jorians, others urged caution. Through it all, Lord Varix watched Alan with a mixture of amusement and contempt. Neither of them knew that this moment would change the galaxy forever. Alan Carter did not wait for the Jorians to respond to his ultimatum. As soon as he left the council chamber, he called his team together on the human diplomatic station. "They won't back down," he told the 12 men and women gathered around the conference table. "Not yet. The Empire has too much pride. So we need to change how the galaxy sees this conflict." Laura Stone, the cultural attaché, nodded. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes. For 10 years, she had helped introduce human art, literature, and history to the galactic community. "What do you have in mind, Ambassador?" she asked. Alan smiled. "The Jorians think we're weak because we prefer peace. They've studied our diplomatic records but clearly haven't understood our history. It's time for an education." Over the next week, Laura and her team released hundreds of historical records from Earth's archives. They showed humanity's numerous wars and conflicts, but more importantly, they showed how those conflicts ended and what humans had learned from them. There were documentaries about the World Wars, the Cold War, and the water conflicts of the 2030s. They released papers written by great human thinkers about war and peace. They shared stories of soldiers, diplomats, and ordinary people who had lived through terrible times and worked to build something better. "We're not showing them this to glorify war," Laura explained to her team. "We're showing them that humans value peace precisely because we understand war all too well." Meanwhile, Alan met privately with representatives from worlds that had suffered Jorian aggression in the past. Some were council members, others were smaller worlds with little political power. He didn't ask them for military support. He offered them something else entirely. For too long, the Empire has taken what it wanted and faced no real consequences. Alan told the representative from HFY, a world that had lost 2 colonies to Jorian expansion 50 years earlier, not because no one opposed them, but because no one coordinated that opposition. The Altarian, a short being with iridescent skin, looked skeptical. "What can Earth do that the rest of us cannot?" "You have fewer ships, less advanced technology." "That's true," Alan agreed. "But we have something else. Perspective. The Jorians have existed for 10,000 years of relative stability. Humans evolved through constant change and challenge. We see patterns they miss, possibilities they overlook. Day by day, Alan built a network of allies, not for war, but for what would come after. Each meeting ended the same way, with Alan making a simple promise. "When this is over, the Empire will never again take what isn't freely given." 2 days before the ultimatum expired, 17 systems that had previously stayed neutral in galactic politics made an announcement. They would no longer trade with the Jorian Empire until the occupied systems were freed. The Jorian leadership laughed it off. These 17 worlds were minor players with limited resources. The Empire's vast economy would barely notice their absence. "What exactly are you trying to accomplish?" Lord Varix asked when he encountered Alan in a council hallway. "These small economic protests are meaningless." Alan looked at the taller alien calmly. "This isn't about the economic impact, Lord Varix. It's about the message. For the first time, worlds that would normally stay silent are speaking out. They're not afraid of you anymore." Varix's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of amusement in his species. "And you think that matters? When your ultimatum expires, what then? Will Earth send its tiny fleet against the Empire? Will you ask these minor worlds to sacrifice themselves in your cause?" "No," Alan said simply. "When the ultimatum expires, we'll show you how humans fight. With ships and weapons." Varix asked, still amused. Alan shook his head. "Those are tools, not strategies. Humans learned long ago that direct confrontation is rarely the best path to victory. You've studied our diplomatic records, but you've missed the most important lesson of human history." "And what is that?" Varix asked, his tone now curious despite himself. "That when we can't win by force," Alan said, "we change the rules of the game." The next day, the Jorian Empire officially rejected the human ultimatum. Their ships remained in the occupied systems, and they announced plans to begin resource extraction within the month. The 20 days were up. Now humanity would respond. The day after the ultimatum expired, the Jorian Empire prepared for a human military response. Their ships formed defensive positions around the occupied systems. Their commanders waited for Earth's fleet to appear. Nothing happened. 2 days passed. Then 3. The Empire's military remained on high alert, but no human warships approached their territory. Lord Varric sent a message to Alan Carter, his tone mocking. "Your ultimatum has failed, Ambassador. Was it merely empty words after all?" Alan did not reply. Instead, he met with Jack Morgan, Earth's trade representative. Jack was a quiet man with dark skin and sharp eyes that missed nothing. For years, he had helped build Earth's trading networks across the galaxy. "Is everything ready?" Alan asked as they sat in his office. Jack nodded. "All Earth-based financial institutions have been notified. They'll act on your command." Alan took a deep breath. "Then let's begin." That afternoon, every human bank and financial institution in the galaxy called in all outstanding Jorian debts at the same time. For decades, Earth had positioned itself as a key source of credit for development projects. Many Jorian merchant houses had taken loans to fund expansion into new markets. Now, all those loans were due immediately. The Jorian financial networks lit up with urgent messages. Merchant lords who thought they had years to repay their debts suddenly needed massive amounts of money within days. The Empire's central bank tried to provide emergency funds, but the demand was too high. The next day, Jack Morgan made another announcement. Effective immediately, human ships would no longer transport goods to or from Jorian territories. Though humans controlled only a small percentage of galactic shipping, they had carefully chosen specialized markets where their services were hard to replace. "Economic pressure is not war," Alan explained to the Council when the Jorians protested. "We are simply exercising our right to choose our trading partners." Lord Varric was furious. "This is a direct attack on our economy. You claim to seek peace while trying to strangle our trade." "We gave you a chance to withdraw peacefully," Alan replied calmly. "You chose to ignore it. Now you face the consequences." The Jorian Empire scrambled to find alternative shipping for their specialized goods. They offered higher rates to other species, but many now hesitated to work with them. The Empire's reputation was changing. They were no longer seen as an unbeatable force. By the end of the first month, the effects were becoming visible. Prices for luxury goods in the Empire rose sharply. Several major Jorian merchant houses declared bankruptcy when they couldn't repay their loans. The Empire's government stepped in to protect critical industries, but they couldn't shield everyone. Alan kept careful track of the impact. He didn't want ordinary Jorian citizens to suffer. The pressure was specifically designed to affect the wealthy merchant houses and military contractors who supported the Empire's expansion. "How long can we maintain this pressure?" Olivia asked him late one night as they reviewed the latest reports. "As long as necessary," Alan replied. "Earth's economy is diverse. We've been careful not to depend too heavily on Jorian trade. They can't say the same about us." On a secure channel, the President of Earth contacted Alan. "The Joint Chiefs want to know if we should move the fleet closer to the disputed area. Show the flag, so to speak." Alan shook his head. "Not yet. The Jorians are still expecting a military response. That's the kind of conflict they understand, the kind they've prepared for. We need to keep them off balance." "And if they attack our shipping in retaliation?" the President asked. "Then they'll unite the Council against them," Alan explained. "Right now, many species are staying neutral. An attack on civilian shipping would change that instantly." The President nodded. "Very well. Continue as planned." "But Alan, the occupied colonies are reporting food shortages. The Empire is restricting supplies to anyone who won't pledge loyalty. Alan's expression hardened. Then it's time for Phase 2. Get me Susan Lewis. Susan Lewis was Earth's communications director. What she had been quietly preparing for the past 15 years was about to change the nature of this conflict completely. The Shorian Empire thought economic pressure was humanity's only weapon. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Susan Lewis had a simple office on the human diplomatic station. The walls were plain, the furniture basic. Nothing about the room suggested its importance. But from this space, Susan had spent 15 years building something revolutionary. "We're ready whenever you give the word," she told Alan as they sat across from each other. Susan was a woman of average height with brown hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything. Before joining the diplomatic corps, she had been a network specialist for Earth's global communications grid. "The situation in the colonies is getting worse," Alan said. "The Empire is using food as a weapon. We need to act now." Susan nodded. "Once we start, there's no going back. The Jorians will know exactly what we've been doing all these years. They've left us no choice," Alan replied. "Begin the information protocol." Susan turned to her computer and entered a series of commands. Around the galaxy, dormant programs hidden within countless communication networks came to life. For 15 years, humans had been hired as network architects and security consultants across thousands of worlds. Many species valued human creativity and problem-solving abilities when it came to information systems. What no one realized was that these human experts had been quietly building backdoors into every network they touched. Not for spying. Earth's leaders had strict rules against that. The backdoors remained unused, a last resort option for a crisis exactly like this one. Now those access points became windows into the Empire. Suddenly, citizens across Shorian space had access to unfiltered information. They could see the truth about the occupied colonies. They could read reports about corruption among imperial governors and resource hoarding by elite families. Most damaging were the authenticated recordings of Imperial Council meetings where Jorian leaders discussed their own people with contempt. In one recording, a high-ranking official called ordinary Jorians replaceable parts in the imperial machine. The Empire's carefully maintained image of benevolent rule began to crumble from within. "Our communication satellites in the occupied systems are being jammed," Susan reported 3 days later. "The Empire is trying to cut off information flow." Ellen wasn't concerned. "They're fighting yesterday's battle. Our systems don't rely on traditional broadcast methods anymore." He was right. The human communication network had been designed with redundancy in mind. When one path was blocked, information simply flowed through another. Rural areas on Jorian worlds began setting up simple relay stations using technology provided by human merchants years earlier. The Empire's military tried to find and destroy these relays, but there were too many, and more appeared each day. Ordinary Jorians, who had never questioned their leaders before, began to wonder why the Empire was so desperate to control what information they could access. On the occupied worlds, human colonists used the network to organize passive resistance. They shared information about Jorian patrol schedules and created systems to distribute food and medicine to those in need. After 2 weeks, protests began on several Jorian worlds. Citizens gathered in public spaces, demanding explanations from their leaders. Some called for the Empire to withdraw from the occupied systems. Others wanted broader reforms. The Empire responded with force. Security forces broke up protests and arrested organizers. But for every person detained, 2 more seemed to take their place. "You've unleashed chaos," Lord Varix accused Alan during a heated council session. "Your information warfare is destroying the stability of our society." Alan remained calm. "We've only shared truth, Lord Varix. If truth threatens your stability, perhaps your empire isn't as strong as you believed." The Shorian leadership held an emergency meeting. Their economy was under pressure. Their people were asking uncomfortable questions. Yet they still controlled the most powerful military force in the sector. They decided it was time to remind humanity of that fact. A Jorian battle fleet of 30 major warships and over 100 support vessels set course for Earth. The message was clear: stop the economic and information campaigns, or face destruction. When Alan received the news, he didn't panic. Instead, he contacted Admiral George Winters. The time had come for the military phase of humanity's response. But it wouldn't be the kind of battle the Jorians were expecting. Admiral George Winters stood on the bridge of the EDF Defender, Earth's newest battleship. He was a tall man with short white hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades in space. Around him, the crew worked with quiet efficiency as they prepared for the coming confrontation. The Jorian fleet will reach our outer sensor range in 6 hours, his second-in-command reported. George nodded. And our ships are in position. Yes, sir. All units report ready. Earth had only 45 warships available to face the Jorian battle fleet. On paper, it was no contest. The Jorian ships were larger, with more advanced weapons and stronger shields. In a direct battle, the human fleet would be destroyed. But George had no intention of fighting that kind of battle. Begin Operation Shadow, he ordered. Across the star system, human ships activated special equipment that had been developed in secret over the past decade. These devices created false sensor readings that made each ship appear to be in multiple locations at once. Meanwhile, smaller vessels began targeting the support infrastructure the Jorian fleet relied upon. Communication relays, navigation beacons, and supply depots all came under precise attacks. They expect us to meet them head-on, George explained to his officers. That's how the older species fight. They line up their biggest ships and hammer each other until one side gives up. But humans learn different lessons in our wars. He pointed to the tactical display showing the approaching Jorian fleet. They have superior firepower, but their command structure is rigid. Their ships need constant communication with their commanders. If we disrupt that, they'll be fighting blind. The human ships didn't attempt to match the Jorian fleet in direct combat. Instead, they executed hundreds of small-scale precision strikes. Fast attack craft would appear, fire targeted shots at communication arrays or sensor pods, then vanish before the Jorians could respond. Admiral, the enemy fleet is slowing, a sensor officer reported. They've lost contact with their forward scouts. George nodded. What about their supply chain? Completely disrupted, sir. Our attack groups have disabled 17 supply ships and 32 fuel tankers. No casualties reported on either side. That was important to George. His orders from Earth had been clear: minimize loss of life. This wasn't about destroying the Jorian military. It was about showing them they couldn't use it effectively against humans. The Jorian admiral, frustrated by the human tactics, ordered his fleet to advance toward Earth at full speed. But without their support network, the mighty warships found themselves operating with limited fuel, disrupted communications, and unreliable navigation data. 3 days into what the Jorian Empire had planned as a show of force, their battle fleet was scattered across several light-years of space. Some ships had been forced to shut down all non-essential systems to conserve fuel. Others were struggling with malfunctioning sensors after precisely targeted human strikes. Not a single Jorian warship had been destroyed, but not a single one was combat effective either. We never needed to outgun them, Alan explained to the Galactic Council as reports of the confrontation spread. We just needed to ensure they couldn't effectively use their guns. Lord Varix was furious. This is not how civilized species conduct warfare. You've refused to face our fleet in honorable battle. Elen raised an eyebrow. Was it honorable to send 30 warships against a planet that had done nothing but defend its rights under Council law? We didn't start this conflict, Lord Varix, but we will end it in our own way. The human strategy confused many older species in the Council. They had expected Earth to either surrender in the face of superior force or fight and lose in a traditional space battle. Instead, humans had found a third option. Your fleet is stranded, your economy is struggling, and your people are questioning your leadership," Alan told Lord Varix. "How much longer will the Empire continue this failed policy?" Varix stood tall, his pride still intact despite the setbacks. "The Jorian Empire does not surrender, Ambassador Carter. We have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. This inconvenience will not change that." Alan nodded slowly. "Then you leave us no choice but to show you what happens when humanity truly commits to a cause." He turned to the Council Elder. "I request permission to address the full Council tomorrow. Earth wishes to propose a new approach to galactic security." The Elder granted his request, curious about what the humans planned next. No one realized that Alan's proposal would forever change the balance of power among the stars. Alan stood before the full Galactic Council the next day. Representatives from all 37 spacefaring civilizations watched with interest. The last 6 months had changed how many of them viewed humans. What had started as a simple territorial dispute had evolved into something much more significant. For too long, the galaxy has lived with the understanding that might makes right. Alan began. Powerful empires take what they want, and smaller worlds suffer in silence. Today, Earth proposes a different path forward. He activated the large display behind him, showing a map of the galaxy with dozens of worlds highlighted in green. What you see are the worlds that have already agreed to join what we call the Coalition of Consequences. Not a military alliance, but a mutual support network. An attack on one is considered an attack on all. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The highlighted worlds included many that had traditionally remained neutral in galactic politics. "How is this different from existing defense treaties?" asked the representative from Centauri Prime, a world known for its cautious diplomacy. "Because it's not based on military response," Alan explained. "Each world contributes what they do best. Some provide technologies, others offer resources or specialized knowledge. Earth coordinates these contributions to create solutions tailored to each crisis." Over the next hour, Alan outlined how the coalition would function. The Tellerates would provide advanced encryption to protect communications. The Verandi would share agricultural techniques to help worlds cut off from supply chains. The Calderans offered their extensive shipyards to retool merchant vessels. Lord Varix watched with growing concern. The worlds joining this coalition included many that the Jorian Empire had long considered within their sphere of influence. "This is nothing but an attempt to build an anti-Jorian alliance," he finally declared, rising from his seat. Alan shook his head. "The coalition is open to all worlds, including those of the Jorian Empire. This isn't about opposing any single power. It's about ensuring that no power can impose its will through force alone." As the council session ended, representatives from a dozen more worlds approached Alan, expressing interest in joining the coalition. The idea was spreading faster than even he had anticipated. The next week brought a direct test of the coalition's effectiveness. Jorian forces, attempting to regain control of the narrative, moved to seize a Calderan shipyard located near one of the disputed systems. The Empire expected to face token resistance at most. Instead, they found an integrated defense network that incorporated technologies from 17 different species. Sensor jammers confused Jorian targeting systems. Automated drones intercepted communications. Shield generators protected key installations. Not a single shot was fired. The Jorian ships simply couldn't penetrate the defenses, and eventually withdrew in frustration. "This is what cooperation looks like," Alan told Olivia as they watched the reports come in. "Each world contributing what they do best, creating something stronger than any single species could manage alone." The Jorian Empire's leadership was now facing difficult questions from all sides. Their economy continued to struggle under human-led sanctions. Their military had been embarrassed by the failure to intimidate Earth. Now, this new coalition threatened to permanently reduce their influence. "We should have crushed the humans when they first reached space," one Imperial counselor said during a closed meeting. Unknown to him, his words were being broadcast across Jorian space through the Human Information Network. The situation has become untenable. The Zhorian Emperor finally admitted to his inner circle. We must find a way to end this conflict while preserving our dignity. He turned to his most trusted advisor. Contact Ambassador Carter. Tell him the Empire is willing to discuss withdrawal from the occupied systems, under certain conditions. When Alan received the message, he allowed himself a small smile. It's a start, he told Olivia. But this was never just about those 3 systems. It's about ensuring this never happens again. The conflict had entered its final phase. The Zhorian Empire was ready to negotiate, but humanity's goals had expanded. Alan wasn't just seeking peace, he was reshaping the galaxy. 3 years had passed since the Zhorian Empire annexed the 3 systems that sparked the conflict. In that time, the galaxy had changed in ways few could have imagined. Alan Carter walked through the grand hall of the new Galactic Charter headquarters. The building stood on neutral ground, a space station constructed specifically for this purpose at the intersection of several major trade routes. Representatives from over 60 worlds now worked here, coordinating the new galactic order. Ambassador Carter, a voice called. Alan turned to see the Zhorian Emperor himself approaching. No longer an absolute ruler, he now served as the elected representative of the Zhorian Federation. The once mighty empire had transformed into a collection of semi-autonomous worlds, each with its own local government. Emperor Gen. Alan greeted him with a respectful nod. Or should I say Representative Gen now? The tall Zhorian gave a slight smile. I find I prefer the new title. It comes with fewer burdens and more meaningful work. They walked together toward the central chamber where the final signing of the new Galactic Charter would take place. This document, 3 years in the making, would establish rules for trade, territorial expansion, and conflict resolution that all member worlds agreed to follow. Did you ever imagine it would end this way? Zhen asked quietly. When you first challenged our annexation? Alan considered the question. Not exactly this way, no, but I knew something had to change. The old system wasn't sustainable. The Zhorian Empire had eventually withdrawn from the occupied systems, but that was just the beginning. The economic pressure, information campaigns, and growing coalition had revealed deep cracks in the imperial structure. Citizen protests grew until the emperor had been forced to accept reforms. The biggest surprise came from within the empire itself. Once ordinary Zhorians gained access to unfiltered information, many began demanding the same rights and freedoms they saw on other worlds. Within a year, the Emperor had announced a transition to a federation of worlds with protected rights for all citizens. My advisors said we should have crushed Earth immediately, Zhen admitted. They said allowing humans to spread through the galaxy would be our downfall. And was it? Alan asked. Zhen looked around at the diverse species working together in the hall. It was the end of the Empire as we knew it, but not our civilization's downfall. Change was inevitable. You humans just accelerated it. They entered the central chamber where representatives from all member worlds waited for the signing ceremony. Among them were many familiar faces: Laura Stone, Jack Morgan, Susan Lewis, and Admiral Winters. Each had played a vital role in resolving the conflict. Olivia Wright, now Earth's chief diplomat, joined Alan and Jen. The chamber is ready, gentlemen. It's time. As the formal ceremony began, Alan reflected on how much had changed. The Zhorian military, once used for conquest, now focused on peacekeeping missions approved by the Charter. Their economy had recovered and diversified after dropping traditional imperial barriers, and their society had found a new balance between their ancient traditions and modern rights. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning, Alan said when it was his turn to speak. 3 years ago, humanity faced a choice when peace was broken. We could have responded with traditional warfare, fighting power with power. Instead, we chose a different path. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of many who had once been skeptics or even enemies. Humanity doesn't seek the destruction of any civilization. We only sought to end the age of empires. not through war, but by showing the galaxy a better way forward. As representatives lined up to sign the new charter, Jen stood beside Alan. "You know," the former emperor said quietly, "in our historical records, we have a saying about species that rise quickly to prominence. We call them the young flames, bright but brief." Alan smiled. "And what do you think now?" Jen watched as worlds that had been enemies for centuries signed the same document, agreeing to the same rules. "I think the galaxy underestimated humans. You don't just burn bright. You light the way for others." The lesson spread across the stars. Underestimate humans at your peril. They don't need to outfight you to defeat you. They just need you to break the peace first.